Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional, providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, Justin Daniels here. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback, helping companies design and implement cyber plans, as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by, love the symbols, Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, professional services, and digital media. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more and to check out our new book, Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time, visit redcloveradvisors.com.
Are you ready for today?
Are you ready for today?
Well, you've been cold all morning and complaining the house is too cold.
It's freezing.
Well,
I have my winter socks on. I had to go outside and sit in the sun to try and warm up.
yes. Do our viewers know that your winter socks look like a penguin?
Everyone should have penguin socks.
I see. Well, today we have a very special guest because we're going to take Jody down the ride to the blockchain side. And to do that, we have Marlon Williams here today, and he is the founder of the cloud-based software service Qubicles.io, a co-founder of the Telos.net blockchain, and founder of Starter Labs, a leading launchpad incubator and investor network for blockchain-based projects. Marlon is also a partner at Starter Capital and founder of the Atlanta Blockchain Center, an initiative wholly funded and operated by Starter Labs. He attended Central Florida Vocational at 16 years old as his start into computer programming and business management. Then went on to study computer information systems and information technology at Miami-Dade College and Kaplan University, respectively. Good morning, Marlon.
Good morning. Good morning.
I feel like that was getting ready. Big popular movie.
Yes, that's Good Morning Vietnam.
I know. It's like one line that I know.
Yes. Well, I'm impressed by that.
You should be.
Given you asked me yesterday, what was that movie when they were asking about Bed Bath & Beyond? Was that?
I got that there was a line that I didn't know the actual movie is not the point.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go back to Marlon.
Can't be helped. All right, let's go.
I'm going to ask Marlon to tell us a little bit. We got a glimpse that you started school at 16 and a few of your schools, but tell us how you found your way to Atlanta with an Atlanta Blockchain Center. So fill us in a little bit on your career.
Yes, sure. I'd be happy to. So as Justin just read, I got introduced to computer programming at 16 via a vocational course called Business Software Applications. And in that course, we studied a ton of programming. Is for half of the curriculum, and the other half we spent in business concepts. So things like, how to launch a business, marketing, and so forth. But what really intrigued me was the computer programming. At that time, I wasn't even aware that industry existed, to be quite honest with you. So when I started coding and saw that what I had in my head from the project assignment actually responded in the way that I created it inside the computer, I fell in love with it, with the power that it wielded, and kind of just immersed myself into computer programming ever since. I spent a lot of time studying and learning about Bill Gates, and this is now late 90s. So Microsoft was at this point where they were, the top of their game, very competitive, had an antitrust lawsuit going on, and a few other things. And others like Joel Spolsky, just an indie web developer that was blogging about software development and how to launch a software-based startup. So those were really the core part of my inspiration, and after I graduated the vocational course, I remember writing a letter to the instructor saying, now all I want to be is a successful software businessman. I literally said it like that. By this point, I'm 18 years old. So I joined Miami-Dade Community College at the time. Now it's, fully 4-year accredited college for computer information systems. And while I was doing that, I started looking for some software development jobs in any field, really, and got hired at a startup, a medical transcription startup, which was just about a year and year and a half old. So that was my first job in the space, and it confirmed my love for software, and because it was a startup, I was employee number 2. I ended up doing a lot more than coding. I was coding, and then the features that I wrote, I had to pitch it to the doctor's offices, many times visiting them to go pitch it. And whenever issues were reported, then I'd have to come back and fix it. So I also, did the tech support calls from the features that I wrote when they didn't work. So that was really what kind of started my path in the space of software and entrepreneurship. I'd be happy to keep going, but I know.
Well, let's bring it forward a little bit. So in our house, we have a lot of acronyms. The privacy world has all kinds of acronyms, but we hear a lot of A, B, C, not to be confused with the ones that we used to sing our kids. So can you tell us a little bit more about the Atlanta Blockchain Center, how that came to be, and your vision for it?
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. So, just building on the last response there. So which makes it a lot more easy to understand why ABC exists once you hear this. But after that first job, I went to another company where I was completely coding, 8 hours a day. My peers were all developers, so it wasn't as interactive and fun like the first job, where it was a startup. So I'd have to go visit real people like doctors and physicians' assistants and other humans, not just robots like myself. So I kind of missed that interaction with people after I left the company. So I spent, the next 9 months building a competitor to my first job. Started building a similar kind of platform. Launched it, did really well. That brought a lawsuit along with it, and other issues that was my first foray into software entrepreneurship. And at this time, I'm 24 years old, going on 25, and pivoted the company, and essentially ended up getting bought out because of the decision to pivot, which was a very, very successful pivot in the end. So that led me, and around this time now, it's 2008, a year later, I'm hearing this noise about Bitcoin. As a software developer, we knew that, most developers were building platforms, knew that there would be some sort of currency that would be native software and platforms versus integrations with other networks like Visa and so forth through third-party processors like Authorize.net, et cetera. So I just followed along with what was happening in the Bitcoin space. I got more involved around 2013. And by that time, I was on my second startup. But which was a call center software company, still around today. And just kind of started getting more and more involved in the blockchain space. And, in and around 2016 or so, a friend of mine and I in Miami, and by the way, spent the last 26 years building my entire career in Miami before moving to Atlanta. But a friend of mine and I, we started working on different blockchain-based ideas. And we were some of the guys sort of going around in Miami, having meetups and talking to folks about the promise of blockchain, not from an investment perspective, but building and ideation. Well before Miami became what is now the crypto capital, or some would label it the crypto capital of the country. So moving to fast forward to 2021, when I officially moved to Atlanta for family reasons, I naturally started looking for a similar environment, of like-minded builders and entrepreneurs, software developers in the blockchain space. And, between my first true foray into blockchain and then, and that up to that point, I had done a ton of work building systems, co-founded blockchains and worked in blockchain-based projects in various capacities. So that's naturally what I'm looking for as I moved to Atlanta. And I couldn't find it in a consistent manner, right? There were some activities every now and then, that would be a month, something happens and nothing happens for another 2-3 months. And that's why I decided to start the Atlanta Blockchain Center, because I really believe that, the blockchain space, just the technology as a whole, is going to have a significant impact on everyone's lives for the foreseeable future, especially, after the next 5 to 10 years, as we see things like regulation and so forth become commonplace. But that's why we decided to launch the Blockchain Center. And in a nutshell, the Blockchain Center is on a mission to, contribute in a significant way to making Atlanta a top location for blockchain innovation. And the reason I think it's a perfect city for that, the Metro Atlanta area rather, is because of all the things that I've learned about it since moving here. It's just constantly on the top list of things, right? Top engineering schools, top places to live, it's a fintech hub essentially of the world. Atlanta Hartsfield is the #1 business airport in the world. I mean, there's just so many amazing things about it. I was shocked that no one put their stake in the ground to help build a true blockchain native community in Atlanta.
Our kids would like to add #1 in traffic. Blockchain helps solve that problem.
That's true.
I'm hoping that Marlon and I can co-develop the Star Trek where it just vaporizes you and puts it right where you need to be.
There you go.
I agree. So, Marlon, one of the special things about having you on today is you're actually a developer. And we talk to developers across all kinds of industries, but maybe you can help us from a developer's perspective, help our audience understand how developers think about developing blockchain platforms and why security remains such a persistent challenge, from digital wallets to smart contracts to side chains and that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. I think, I'm on my second decade, a little over my second decade as a software developer, and I still enjoy coding to this day, mostly to make sure the team is aware that I still got it. But we start out with specific problems we'd like to solve for, and then we focus on coding for those specific problems, right? And there are best practices that we're taught, especially coming from the old school, where things like cross-site scripting, SQL injection attacks, sanitizing data entry is it's entered by users and not simply accepting it for face value and serializing that to databases. So those sort of common best practices are in place, including using proven frameworks as opposed to building your own modules or features and functions from scratch. If there's something that's been proven, it's well respected, a framework that you could simply import into your platform, you should do that, and that helps reduce the likelihood of bugs and exposure to exploits, right? So, those are the common sort of things that we're taught. But those best practices, quite frankly, Justin and Jody, they're most likely to be applied in larger teams with larger budgets, because the reality is slightly different for startups, right, versus corporate. So startup teams are usually leaner. They're much, less, they're less capitalized, right? So they don't have the resources that they need. And they usually have 1 to 3 developers, as a startup team gets going, right? Mostly, common is the more common is to have 1 developer in place, and your business co-founder is, constantly putting pressure on getting the job done, getting to an MVP, getting some sort of tangible site that he or she could start promoting and sharing in the community to help find that initial traction for the first 1, 10, or 100th customer, right? So we mostly build for speed and just enough quality to satisfy that need. And I think that's where a lot of the issues come from, particularly again with the startup teams. And by the way, this is just the traditional issues and approaches with software development, platforms. It's even more challenging for blockchain-based solutions, because the reality is, a blockchain developer is completely different, the skill set, than a traditional Web 1 or Web 2 developer. There are a lot of things that we need to consider as a blockchain developer that isn't necessarily an issue with the traditional software developer. For example, depending on the consensus algorithm, which, as you know, is the game theory that helps the blockchain serialize its transactions, has a huge impact on how you write your code, because you have to think about the participants in that network and solve for or try to prevent any gamification of or exploit of your particular product, right? So the consensus mechanisms that you use in building blockchain-based solutions are a huge part in, the software development lifecycle for blockchain-based projects. I think another common one is, block finality. And Jody, what essentially that means is a block needs to be finalized, right, before it can be considered valid. If you're writing, so it's equivalent to going into Walmart with a credit card, swiping the card at the counter, and waiting for the MasterCard or Visa network to finalize the transaction by checking your balance, making sure that you can indeed afford that transaction, and finalizing it. So the blockchain has the same concept called block finality. The difference is Visa and MasterCard and other proven networks, they do this quite quickly and fast, right? With some blockchains, it could take minutes, and that's why some of them aren't even suited for real world payment transactions yet, because there's no way that you could have a pure Bitcoin card at Walmart that you swipe and you have to wait 10 minutes for it to say, yes, this is actually valid, right? So, but the point is that these nuances of blockchain technology affects us as developers, because we have to consider that in our programming. And that new level of consideration introduces different potential loopholes for exploits and other things to occur. The last thing I'd say is the ordering of transactions also matters when you're writing software for blockchain. If Justin, Jody, and I are going back to that same cashier analogy, are in line, it's unless I skip the line and you two allow me to do it without confronting me, I have to wait for the two of you to finish before I go. Well, with blockchain, there's certain blockchains. There's a concept called front running, where the transactions, the equivalent of the people in front of you, are known in advance. You could kind of see that Jody is in line and she's about to spend $50 buying,
Lululemon.
There you go.
Okay, me very much.
And then Justin is right behind her and he's ready to spend $1,000 on
mountain biking items.
Right? So I, as the third person in line, I can see that, and I could pay the cashier in advance to skip both of you and place my transaction in such a way that takes advantage of both of your transactions. And those are just, it's called front running, but those are different new nuances that software developers have to build for. So, back to your question about, help you to how does developers think about blockchain platforms? It's in that light. So we do apply a lot of the traditional software development best practices that we're taught, but blockchain introduces an entirely new set of challenges where the best practices are just being defined now. So we try to apply both where we can, with, by the way, very little regard for security in many cases because of financial reasons.
And pressure to get to market. Does that sound familiar?
Pressure to get to market?
No. What Marlon's talking about in a certain book.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So now we're going to get to the Jody question that I'm going to ask Marlon, which is, with big brands like Starbucks and college sports looking at NFTs for customer and fan experiences that are unique, how do you see privacy issues coming up as these brands utilize the blockchain to market these unique experiences for their customers?
Well, that's a great question, and it's one that we've been talking about for, say, the past, we as just industry and the ecosystem for the past 2 years. I think in order to understand my response to that, I'll take you just back to a 2012, 2013, where there's a project called Mastercoin that introduced this concept of a token, right? Because the founder wanted to introduce tokens on top of the Bitcoin network without having to utilize as Bitcoin. And that inspired, although it didn't gain a significant amount of traction, that inspired Ethereum, which is the second largest blockchain on the planet, to it inspired the creator of Ethereum to come up with that idea of a platform that could allow anyone to create tokens and build their ideas and sort of create an operating system of finance on the blockchain. So the Mastercoin idea inspired Ethereum. Ethereum inspired a ton of ICOs and initial coin offerings and projects that resulted in the boom that we've seen with NFTs and DeFi, right? And these are concepts that existed years ago. Now, in the most recent bull run, we saw a ton of different experiments on the blockchain with regards to NFTs and DeFi and multi-chain initiatives, meaning there are 5 different blockchains doing 5 different things. How do we get them to interact? How do we get systems and the same application to run on all 5 to kind of bring them all together? So the realization in the industry is that as more and more mainstream adoption takes hold, companies like Starbucks and the NFL and other large entities looking at blockchain-based solutions to implement in their organizations, privacy is going to be a huge part of that. Because in a public blockchain, everything is visible. Unless they're implementing private blockchains or hybrid, where the certain information is flagged as private, that's stored in a private capacity, and other data points could be stored publicly. The need for privacy in a public blockchain is well acknowledged. And that's why we have projects like the Oasis Network, for example, and even Flow and others who are starting to build privacy features into their public blockchains, specifically for that reason, to help big brands trust, and obviously their customers as well, with blockchain technology without exposing their personal identifiable information and other secured information.
You keep looking at me.
Yes, because he was talking about privacy and he mentions trust.
I know, those are all of our favorite words. So in that vein, technology always seems to be behind regulation. So in your mind, what are better regulatory guardrails, or why are they so important to move us to mass adoption of blockchain? You kind of just mentioned how some of these big brands will feel more comfortable as these privacy features are added. I think to really move it further upstream and get that mass adoption, you're going to have even a greater need for this type of regulation.
Absolutely. And, I'm not a crypto anarchist by any means. So I certainly think that regulation is important. It always takes me back to the Roaring '20s, when there were a ton of successful entrepreneurs, creators, builders in the finance space, right? But along with that success came a ton of bad actors. I mean, arguably, it's one of the periods in this country where there was just fraud and other things ran rampant. And that's why laws like the Securities Act, Justin, as you know, in 1934, and other federal regulation to govern the financial industry came to pass. It was specifically because of all of the activity that transpired a decade earlier. So, and that brought the pursuing result of that regulation brought in a lot more stability, less volatility, more security for citizens of this country. And I see the same thing happening with the blockchain industry, particularly digital assets, because blockchain and digital assets are, related, but they're not the same. So specifically with digital assets that are blockchain based, we absolutely need that same sort of 1934 Securities Act to, built specifically for this generation, this new idea of what an asset represents and what it looks like and how it functions. That isn't just a cookie cutter sort of copy from a almost century-year-old set of laws. So we absolutely need these regulatory guardrails. And, if we look at the last 4 years or so, the number of bills in Congress went from, I think, 2 to 4 in 2017 to maybe 10 or so a year later. Now we're seeing tens of bills introduced in Congress that discusses in some capacity regulating digital assets. So it's absolutely critical. I think we need it. We need it faster because developers like me, we'd like that security to know that when we're building financial products that manages digital assets, we're not going to go to jail for it.
You're not going to get arrested in Norway?
Right.
Sanctioning developers who built smart contract that violates OFAC. But I guess the thing I'm going to add, Jody, for the benefit of our audience. So when Marlon talks about all of these laws for digital assets, remember in Congress, they're also competing with the federal privacy law that's trying to see the light of day. There's all these other regulations around cybersecurity. So it really, in my mind, brings to the forefront, Congress has a finite amount of time. So which laws are they going to focus on? Which ones are they going to pass? And that's where I think the lobbying or leaders come into play to say, hey, this blockchain stuff is important. But then we have people on this show who talk about, hey, the new Privacy Federal Act is really important. We need to pass that. And then it's really interesting when you talk about all these different laws. What's Congress going to focus on?
That's why I call it a crystal dart.
Crystal dart.
Okay. That's a great point. That's a great point. And mass adoption will never occur without some clarity around digital assets and regulation. And also a lot of talent are building elsewhere. They have been for the past few years versus the building in the United States. I mean, we've had to incorporate entities internationally when we work on products that includes digital asset creation, simply because there's just no laws that gives us the warm and fuzzy that what we're doing won't eventually come to bite us in the behind in the long run once we finally have an idea of what that regulatory climate looks like. And I just add one more thing that issues like what transpired over the past 2 quarters with Celsius going bankrupt, locking user withdrawals, and Luna, the Luna algorithmic stablecoin essentially crashing, losing tens of billions of dollars in the process. That doesn't make the wider retail investor market who are interested or excited about crypto warm and fuzzy either. I think we do need that regulatory clarity around these things, including the privacy piece, in order to help bring that, excitement back that we've kind of lost over the past few quarters.
Your turn.
So, Marlon, we wanted to ask you, as we ask all our guests, do you have a best privacy or security tip that you would like to share?
Oh yeah, it's very easy. I always say it's an old adage actually in the crypto space, crypto specifically, is not your keys, not your coins. Meaning, never trust your private keys to anyone ever. And if you can safeguard it offline, you should do so. So at least with offline, you have some existing best practices that have been around for centuries that you could apply to securing physical assets and things that are important to you. So do the same thing with your private keys. And that's my number one,
Like
tip
that.
to the average person.
Ain't your keys, it ain't your cheese.
I don't like that one.
Marlon said that one too. We've had that discussion.
Oh, well, maybe he says it better.
See, Marlon, if it comes from you, it's wisdom. If it comes from me, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
So, Marlon, when you're not leading the charge in our community around blockchain, what do you like to do for fun?
Well, I enjoy reading. I'd like to get to a place where I'm reading more than half of my day. I'm not quite there, probably 30%. But I enjoy reading the most, reading all sorts of books. And outside of that, I just, love doing things like going to the farm, horseback riding. I was born in the Caribbean, so a lot of the nostalgic sort of experiences that I get here, especially in Roswell, where there's a ton of farms and a ton of equestrian organizations. I try to do it as much as possible to kind of detach while I'm still thinking about blockchain. That part I haven't figured out yet.
I wish you luck with that one. Where can people find you and learn more?
Atlanta Chain everywhere. Atlanta Chain on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to link that in our show notes as well. We're so grateful that you were here today talking about one of Justin's many favorite topics.
Wow.
We have a lot of favorite topics.
Anyway, thank you. It was great to have you.
Anytime. This is amazing. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.